if you think about when Steve Jobs introduced the original iPhone in 2007, he talked about it being 3 great devices in one. It was, of course, a mobile phone. It was a widescreen iPod with touch interface. It was a new internet device. It wasn't a camera. It has a camera on it, but it wasn't a camera. Why was it not a camera? Why did he not tout the camera capabilities when he introduced it? Yes, it was horrible, right? It was horrible. Sub 3 megapixel, I think it was 1.2 megapixels, something like that. It was a horrible experience, and so they threw it in, but it wasn't really a defining attribute, a defining feature of the product. And then later on, as the technology became inexpensive, it became abundant, it became better, and so we just started to deploy it widely. Think about that image sensor. Early on, it's an expensive, scarce resource. When it becomes an inexpensive, abundant resource, we deploy it widely. We put one not just on the back of your mobile phone, but also on the front of your mobile phone. And obviously now on all of the mobile phones we're carrying, we have multiple image sensors. So what happens when that one shift takes place? When we move the image sensor not just to the back of the mobile phone, but to the front of the mobile phone? Selfies, right? We end up with this. This is what the world turned to. 2013, the word of the year is selfie. We can argue whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. More people die every year in the US taking selfies than in shark attacks. So next time you go to the beach, you can remember that. What I want you to see in this is that as we move from a scarce, expensive resource to an inexpensive, abundant resource, we saw all of these second-order effects kick in. Selfies is a second-order technology effect. It's because the technology got cheap and inexpensive, and we could deploy it widely. The entire influencer industry, arguably, is built upon this premise, that image sensors got cheap and inexpensive, and we could deploy them widely onto the device, and we could make them better quality, and we could empower this entire industry. So that's a big piece of what happens in technology. You have these externalities that kick in. It goes from expensive to inexpensive, we go from scarce to abundant, and then you have both negative and positive externalities. Another great example is email. One of the great things about email is it made it inexpensive to communicate. We could send anybody emails. What's the negative externalities of that? Spam, right? Now anybody can also try to communicate with us. And early on, we try to combat those negative externalities. We create spam filters. Early on, they're not very good. So everybody in this room probably remembers checking their spam folders to see if anything went through. I don't know about you, I don't do that anymore. I presume if you've emailed me and it's ended up in my spam filter, you did something wrong, not me. But early on in that early process, as we're trying to configure it and address the negative externalities, it's not perfect. Those who are sending spam are rewriting the words that they're using, and so there's this cat and mouse game that plays out. There's this back and forth that plays out. And you see that play out in technology. I think that's where we are today early on for your customers when they're thinking about AI. They're seeing positive externalities. They're trying to figure out what are the negative externalities. They're trying to figure out where it sits into their value proposition and what that looks like.